June 6, 1944, 6:30 a.m. Omaha Beach, Normandy. General Major Dietrich Kreis studied the carnage unfolding below his observation post on the bluffs overlooking the invasion beaches. His 352nd Infantry Division had been waiting for this moment since March, and the initial reports exceeded his most optimistic predictions. "The Americans are dying magnificently," he transmitted to the 84th Corps headquarters, unable to suppress his satisfaction. "Young boys, perhaps 18 or 19 years old, drowning in the surf before they reach the sand. Those who make the beach are pinned down. We are destroying them with mathematics." Through his stereoscopic rangefinder, Kreis watched American soldiers struggle through the killing zone his division had spent months perfecting. Bodies floated in the surf. Wounded men crawled behind beach obstacles. The few who reached the seawall huddled there, seemingly paralyzed by the coordinated fire from prepared positions. "They send us children," Oberst Ernst Goth, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment, reported from his bunker complex. "Boys who've never seen combat. We have veterans of the Eastern Front. This will be over by noon." The Wehrmacht's assessment was based on solid intelligence and reasonable assumptions. American forces in England included divisions that had never experienced combat. Their average age was shockingly young. The 29th Infantry Division's median age was 22 years old, with thousands of soldiers barely 18. Many had been civilians less than 2 years earlier. The German defenders, by contrast, were hardened veterans. Men who had survived Russia, North Africa, Italy. Soldiers who knew how to kill efficiently and die reluctantly. The 352nd Division alone contained personnel from 12 different Wehrmacht units, assembled specifically because of their combat experience. What General Major Kreis didn't know, what none of the German commanders watching the slaughter could have imagined, was that within 6 hours, those children would break through defenses that veterans considered impregnable. Within 48 hours, they would establish a beachhead that experts calculated would take a week to secure. Within 90 days, those same teenagers would liberate Paris, destroy 7 German armies, and advance 500 miles into occupied Europe. The German generals thought the American army was too young, too inexperienced, too soft for the brutal arithmetic of modern warfare. They were about to discover that youth brought advantages Wehrmacht doctrine had never anticipated. Fearlessness born of ignorance, initiative unrestrained by rigid training, and an aggressive determination that older, wiser soldiers would have recognized as suicidal. By the time the German generals understood what was happening, the children they dismissed had already won. This is the story of how American teenagers, average age 19, many fresh from high school, defeated the Wehrmacht's finest divisions through sheer audacity, improvisation, and a refusal to accept that what they were attempting was impossible. The German generals laughed at America's boy soldiers on June 6th. By June 7th, they stopped laughing and started dying. The Wehrmacht's assessment of American forces was not casual prejudice. It was professional military analysis based on observable facts and combat experience. Oberst Friedrich August Freiherr von der Heide, commanding the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, had compiled comprehensive intelligence on American forces before D-Day. His May 1944 report to 7th Army headquarters captured the prevailing German attitude. The American soldier is fundamentally different from the Russian, British, or even Italian adversary. He comes from a civilian society that has never experienced hardship. His training period is brief, 12 to 15 weeks basic combat training, compared to our minimum 24 weeks. His officers are often promoted from enlisted ranks after minimal officer training, 3 months at officer candidate school versus our multi-year academy system. Most critically, the average American soldier is extraordinarily young. Intelligence suggests median age of 22 years, with significant numbers 18 to 20 years old. These are not men, they are boys playing at war. They will break at first contact with experienced Wehrmacht formations. Von der Heide's analysis reflected Wehrmacht doctrine developed through 5 years of continuous combat. The German military system, built on Prussian traditions dating back centuries, emphasized lengthy training, rigid discipline, and respect for experience. Officers spent years learning their profession. Enlisted men underwent extensive training before seeing combat. Veterans were treasured, and their experience leveraged ruthlessly. The American system, from German perspective, violated every principle of military competence. General Lieutenant Hans Speidel, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal Rommel, prepared briefings for senior commanders that emphasized American vulnerabilities. American divisions arriving in England show alarming inexperience. The 29th Infantry Division conducted landing exercises in April where coordination between infantry, armor, and naval gunfire completely failed. The 4th Infantry Division required 3 attempts to execute battalion-level amphibious operations successfully. The 90th Infantry Division suffers such poor leadership that regiments have changed commanders twice in 3 months. These divisions face our 352nd Infantry Division on the most heavily fortified section of the Atlantic Wall. The 352nd contains veterans of the Eastern Front who have survived combat the Americans cannot imagine. The mathematical advantage lies entirely with the defender. The mathematics were indeed compelling. Defending prepared positions, military doctrine suggested attackers needed a 3-to-1 advantage for success. Amphibious assault against fortified beaches required 5-to-1 advantages. The Americans would be attacking uphill against interlocking fields of fire, mines, obstacles, and concrete bunkers. The defenders would be German veterans who had held against Soviet human waves in Russia, defeated British attacks in North Africa, and stopped American advances in Italy. Oberst Ernst Goth, whose 916th Grenadier Regiment held the Omaha Beach sector, expressed absolute confidence in his after-action report from May exercises. Our positions are impregnable to frontal assault by inexperienced troops. We have 17 mutually supporting resistance points, each with interlocking fields of fire. Artillery is pre-registered on every meter of the beach. Machine gun positions are fortified with concrete and armored shields. The approaches are mined extensively. Underwater obstacles will destroy landing craft. Against experienced troops, these defenses would cause severe casualties. Against the young Americans we expect, they will create massacre. I have veterans who killed dozens of Russians in single engagements. These Americans have killed no one. German intelligence had thoroughly researched the American forces assembling in England. They knew unit designations, commanders' names, training deficiencies. They had captured American planning documents during Dieppe. They understood Allied doctrine, equipment, tactics. What they didn't understand was American character. The typical Wehrmacht soldier in 1944 was a conscript, often fighting from exhaustion and fear, sustained by discipline and the knowledge that retreat meant death from his own side. He fought competently because rigid training made competent fighting automatic. He followed orders because disobedience brought execution. The typical American soldier was a volunteer or draftee who believed in his cause, trusted his equipment, and operated in a military culture that encouraged initiative. He fought not from discipline but from conviction that what he was doing mattered. More critically, he was young enough to believe he was immortal. Hauptmann Wilhelm Hoppe, commanding a battery of coastal artillery overlooking what would become Utah Beach, wrote to his wife on June 4th, "The Americans are finally coming. After years of preparation, they will test themselves against the Wehrmacht. I almost pity them. They are sending boys. We intercepted radio traffic where officers referred to soldiers as kids and discussed their homesickness. We are sending them against veterans who have survived 3 years of the Eastern Front. This will not be combat, it will be education. A harsh but necessary lesson about the reality of modern warfare. Perhaps after they suffer sufficient losses, they will accept honorable peace terms." The Germans prepared for D-Day with the confidence of professionals facing amateurs. They had reason for that confidence. Their positions were excellently prepared. Their troops were experienced. Their leadership was competent. They had anticipated everything except what actually happened. First wave, the teenagers hit the beach. H hour, 0630, June 6, 1944. Private First Class Robert Sales, Company A, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Infantry Division, was 19 years old. He had graduated from Bedford High School in Virginia 18 months earlier. His total combat experience consisted of 0 engagements, 0 casualties inflicted, 0 days under fire. His landing craft hit a sandbar 75 yards from shore. The ramp dropped into water over 6 feet deep. Sales watched the man in front of him, Sergeant John Wilkes, a 21-year-old former mechanic, disappear into the water. Pulled under by his equipment, he watched 3 more men follow Wilkes into the depths, struggling against the weight of weapons and ammunition that dragged them down. Wehrmacht doctrine assumed that soldiers experiencing such chaos would freeze, would fail to advance, would become casualties to be tallied in after-action reports. Sales, 19 years old, never having experienced combat, made a different decision. He stripped off his pack, held his rifle overhead, and waded toward shore through a storm of machine gun fire that churned the water white around him. He made it 20 yards before a bullet struck his helmet, knocking him sideways. He kept moving. Another round hit his rifle, shattering the stock. He kept moving. He reached the beach, found cover behind a steel beach obstacle, and discovered his rifle was destroyed. Without orders, without waiting for an officer to tell him what to do, he crawled to the nearest body. Private First Class Harold Baumgarten, killed seconds after reaching the sand, and took Baumgarten's rifle. Then he started shooting back at positions he couldn't clearly see, simply firing at the source of incoming tracers, doing something rather than nothing. Sales was not exceptional, he was typical. Across Omaha Beach, 19-year-olds were making similar decisions. Not because of training, their training hadn't covered this level of chaos. Not because of orders. Most officers were dead, wounded, or separated from their units. Because at 19 years old, the concept of personal mortality remains abstract. Fear is real, but the certainty of death is not. Obergefreiter Franz Gockel, manning an MG-42 machine gun and resistance point WN-62, recorded his shock in a diary later captured. The Americans continued advancing despite casualties that should have broken any attack. We killed the first waves completely. They kept coming. We killed the second waves. They kept coming. Young boys, we could see their faces, and they showed not fear but fury. I have fought Russians who attacked from fanaticism or fear of their commissars. These Americans attacked from something else, perhaps ignorance. They did not understand they should stop. The bluff assault, initiative without permission. By 0730, the situation on Omaha Beach appeared hopeless. 2,000 American casualties. Most officers dead or wounded. Units intermingled beyond recognition. No radios functioning. Naval gunfire support ineffective against the fortified German positions. Wehrmacht doctrine, Soviet doctrine, British doctrine, all assumed that an attack suffering such casualties in the first hour would collapse. Senior commanders would order withdrawal. Surviving units would retreat to reorganize. The Americans did something different. They attacked upward. Colonel George Taylor, commanding the 16th Infantry Regiment, arrived on the beach at 0800 to find chaos, dead soldiers everywhere, wounded men crying for medics, troops huddled behind obstacles pinned down by fire from positions on the bluffs that naval guns couldn't suppress. Taylor, a 47-year-old veteran, understood military reality. The attack had failed. Doctrine required consolidation and possibly withdrawal. Instead, he started yelling at teenage soldiers he didn't know and couldn't organize. 2 kinds of people are staying on this beach, the dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here. It wasn't a tactical order. It was barely a command. It was a statement of the only option that made sense to someone old enough to understand you could die waiting as easily as die advancing. What happened next defied military logic. Small groups of soldiers, most between 18 and 22 years old, started moving up the bluffs, without orders, without coordination, without support fire. Just teenagers with rifles moving toward the sources of machine gun fire that had pinned down their units. Private First Class Ingram Lambert, 19 years old, led 5 soldiers up a draw that German intelligence had marked as impassable under fire. And they crawled over bodies. They threw grenades into bunkers. They shot German soldiers at ranges measured in feet. Lambert was killed reaching the top. The 4 survivors, none older than 20, cleared 3 machine gun positions before running out of ammunition. Then they used captured German weapons to continue advancing. General Major Kreis, watching from his observation post, transmitted increasingly confused reports to headquarters. The Americans are not retreating despite catastrophic losses. Small groups are attempting to scale the bluffs at multiple points. This is not organized attack. It is individual initiative by junior soldiers. I am repositioning reserves to contain penetrations, but the Americans appear at different points faster than we can respond. Their tactics make no sense. They advance without supporting fire. They attack fortified positions with small arms. They suffer casualties that should break unit cohesion but continue attacking. Request clarification. Are we facing conventional troops or fanatics? The answer was neither. Christ was facing 19-year-olds who didn't know that what they were attempting was militarily impossible. The breakout, youth versus experience. By 1000 hours, the situation had reversed impossibly. American soldiers were on top of the bluffs. Resistance points that had dominated the beach all morning were being attacked from behind. German defenders prepared for frontal assault found themselves fighting American teenagers who had somehow climbed cliffs, crossed minefields, and flanked positions considered unflankable. Oberstgoth attempted to organize counterattacks using his reserve companies. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized immediate counterattack to eliminate penetrations before they could be exploited. His counterattacks failed for reasons German doctrine hadn't anticipated. American soldiers, finding themselves behind German lines, didn't consolidate defensive positions as doctrine required. They kept attacking. Small groups of teenagers, separated from their units, operating without orders, simply continued advancing inland because no one had told them to stop. Sergeant Frank Peregrine, 23 years old, ancient by the standards of his unit, led a group of 8 soldiers, average age 19, that captured a German strongpoint by walking through a minefield that German defenders assumed impassable. When asked later why he'd risked the minefield, Peregrine responded, "Didn't know it was there. We saw Germans shooting at our guys from that building, so we went to kill the Germans. Found out about the mines when one of the guys stepped on one. By then we were halfway through, so we kept going." The German defenders had assumed rational behavior. Rational soldiers don't walk through minefields. Rational soldiers don't attack fortified positions without support. Rational soldiers consolidate gains and wait for reinforcement. American teenagers didn't know enough to be rational. By 1200 hours, General Major Crace transmitted a situation report that revealed complete reversal of his morning confidence. American forces have achieved multiple penetrations of our defensive line. Resistance points WN60, WN62, WN65, and WN68 are surrounded or destroyed. American infantry is advancing inland at multiple points. I am committing all reserves to prevent complete collapse, but American infiltration tactics make coordinated defense extremely difficult. Enemy displays unexpected aggression and initiative at junior levels. Our experienced soldiers fight well but are overwhelmed by numbers and by American willingness to accept casualties that should be prohibitive. Request immediate reinforcement. The reinforcements never came. The 352nd Division, considered one of the Wehrmacht's most capable formations, was being destroyed by soldiers whose average time in uniform was less than 2 years. Utah Beach. When everything goes wrong, goes right. 4 miles north at Utah Beach, the 4th Infantry Division experienced a different kind of chaos that produced the same result. Strong currents and smoke from naval bombardment caused the entire landing force to miss its designated beach by nearly 2 kilometers. The first wave, led by Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., at 56 years old, the oldest man on the beach, landed in the wrong location entirely. Wehrmacht defenders waited at the planned landing beaches. The Americans landed where defenses were weaker, unintentionally finding the path of least resistance. Roosevelt, discovering the error, made a decision that Wehrmacht doctrine considered insane. "We'll start the war from right here." Rather than attempt to shift the landing to the correct beach, which would mean exposing subsequent waves to fire while reorienting the entire assault, Roosevelt decided to simply attack inland from where they were. The decision worked because junior American officers and NCOs, many in their early 20s, adapted instantly to the changed circumstances. Objectives were shifted, new routes were identified, units moved inland without waiting for orders from higher headquarters. Hauptmann Wilhelm Hoppe, commanding the coastal battery that had prepared for months to destroy the American landing, found himself engaging targets kilometers from where intelligence had predicted. His after-action report captured Wehrmacht confusion, The Americans landed at the wrong location. Rather than correct their error, they simply changed their objectives and attacked wherever they found themselves. This flexibility at junior levels is unprecedented. Our defensive planning assumed Americans would follow rigid doctrine. They appear to have no doctrine, simply aggressive movement toward any German position. By 2 p.m., the 4th Infantry Division had advanced further inland than any Allied unit on D-Day, suffering fewer casualties than predicted, achieving objectives faster than planned, all because they'd landed in the wrong place and teenage platoon leaders had simply adapted. The paratrooper problem, chaos as doctrine. Behind German lines, American and British paratroopers created a different kind of chaos. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions had dropped during darkness, scattered by winds, anti-aircraft fire, and pilot error. Less than 20% of soldiers landed near their intended drop zones. Units were intermixed beyond recognition. Most soldiers couldn't find their officers. Radio communications were nearly impossible. Wehrmacht doctrine assumed that such disorder would neutralize airborne forces for days. Scattered units, without coordination or clear objectives, would be hunted down and destroyed piecemeal by German forces. The Germans hadn't accounted for American paratroopers being predominantly teenagers who treated the situation as an adventure rather than a disaster. Private First Class John Steele, whose parachute caught on a church steeple in St. Mary Glees, he was 23, relatively old for his unit, watched as scattered American paratroopers simply attacked whatever German forces they encountered without waiting to reorganize into proper units. Small groups of soldiers, 3, 5, 8 men, would gather by chance, identify German positions, and attack them. Not because orders directed them to, not because it was tactically sound, simply because they found Germans and decided killing Germans was presumably what they were supposed to do. Oberstleutnant Friedrich von der Heide, commanding German paratroopers facing the American drops, recorded his bewilderment. The American airborne forces operate without apparent organization or coordination. Yet this chaos proves more difficult to counter than organized attack. We cannot predict where they will appear because they themselves do not know. We cannot cut their communications because they have no communications to cut. We cannot destroy their command structure because they have no command structure. We face thousands of heavily armed teenagers wandering the countryside attacking whatever German forces they encounter. This is not military operation, it is armed anarchy, and we are losing to it. By dawn on June 7th, American paratroopers had accomplished missions that German analysis considered impossible given their scattered drop. They had secured causeway exits from Utah Beach, they had destroyed artillery batteries. They had created such chaos behind German lines that Wehrmacht commanders couldn't organize coherent counterattacks. Not through superior training or better equipment, but through thousands of individual decisions by teenagers who simply refused to accept that being scattered and disorganized meant they should stop fighting. The first week, improvisation versus doctrine. The week following D-Day demonstrated the fundamental difference between Wehrmacht combat experience and American teenage aggression. German units, following doctrine, attempted to organize coordinated counterattacks to eliminate the beachhead. They maneuvered carefully. They husbanded resources. They operated according to principles proven effective over 5 years of warfare. American units simply attacked continuously in every direction. The 2nd Infantry Division, which had landed on June 7th, was supposed to spend 3 days consolidating before beginning offensive operations. Instead, battalions started attacking inland within hours of reaching the beach. Company commanders, mostly lieutenants in their early 20s, identified German positions and attacked them without waiting for division-level operations orders. Major General Walter Robertson, commanding the 2nd Infantry Division, later described his confusion. I was attempting to organize a coordinated divisional attack when I discovered my battalions had already advanced 2 miles beyond where I thought they were. Company commanders had simply started attacking on their own initiative. In any military academy, this would be considered a court-martial offense. Failure to follow orders, breaking unit cohesion, unauthorized offensive action. But it worked. The Germans were preparing to defend against an attack I was still planning. By the time I issued orders, my units had already seized the objectives. This pattern repeated across the entire beachhead. American units moved faster than German intelligence could track them. Attacks came from unexpected directions. Objectives were seized before German defenders had prepared positions. Wehrmacht veterans, accustomed to Soviet forces that attacked in predictable waves or British forces that advanced methodically, couldn't adapt to American forces that seemed to attack randomly but continuously. General-Lieutenant Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff of 7th Army, transmitted an assessment to OB West, Wehrmacht Command West, on June 10th that revealed complete reversal of pre-invasion confidence. American forces demonstrate unexpected combat effectiveness despite lack of experience. Their tactics are unorthodox. Junior officers operate with independence that in our system would require field-grade rank. Enlisted soldiers show initiative that we expect only from NCOS. Most troubling, American forces accept casualties that should break unit cohesion but continue offensive operations. They do not pause to reorganize after losses. They do not consolidate gains before advancing. They simply attack continuously until killed or successful. We cannot match this tempo. Our soldiers are more experienced, better trained, tactically superior. But American forces maintain operational tempo that exhausts our defensive responses. The bocage, where youth beat experience. The Norman hedgerows, the bocage, should have been the great equalizer. Dense vegetation, ancient earth banks, narrow lanes created terrain that negated American advantages in mobility and firepower. Each field became a fortress. Each hedgerow concealed German defenders. Wehrmacht veterans, experienced in defensive warfare, created killing zones that should have bled American forces white. Instead, the bocage became the environment where American teenage soldiers proved most dangerous. Traditional military doctrine for attacking fortified positions emphasized reconnaissance, supporting fire, coordinated assault. Attack only after identifying defensive positions, suppressing them with artillery, then advancing under covering fire. American teenagers did something simpler. They walked into fields until Germans shot at them. Then they shot back and kept advancing. Private First Class Carlton Barrett, 18 years old, described the technique with stark simplicity. You couldn't see nothing through those hedgerows, so we just walk into the field. If Germans shot at us, we knew where they were. Then we'd throw grenades and shoot back. Sometimes we got killed, sometimes they got killed. We just kept doing it until we ran out of Germans. This approach was tactically insane. It guaranteed casualties. It wasted the element of surprise. It violated every principle taught in military academies. It also worked faster than methodical reconnaissance. Hauptmann Gustav Schmidt, defending a sector near St. Lo, recorded the impossibility of defending against such tactics. The Americans attack without reconnaissance or preparation. They simply advance into fields, accept initial casualties. Then assault our positions with grenades and automatic weapons at close range. We kill many of them, but they keep coming. Our experienced soldiers fight skillfully, but American replacements arrive constantly. Young soldiers, 18 or 19 years old, who show no fear because they lack experience to teach them fear. We defend one hedgerow, kill a dozen Americans, then more arrive and eventually overrun our position through sheer persistence. By mid-June, American divisions were advancing through the bocage at rates German commanders considered impossible. Not through tactical brilliance, but through relentless pressure maintained by soldiers too young to understand, they were attempting the impossible. The St. Lo breakthrough, speed over caution. July 18, 1944, Operation Cobra, the American breakout from Normandy. The plan required careful coordination between infantry, armor, and artillery. Establish favorable jump-off positions, conduct reconnaissance, identify German strong points, suppress them with overwhelming firepower, then advance methodically, consolidating gains. The 90th Infantry Division, considered one of the least effective American divisions, was supposed to conduct a supporting attack, minor role. Limited objectives. Instead, soldiers from the 90th, average age 21, simply started attacking every German position they could find. Company commanders, mostly first lieutenants with 6 months of experience, identified gaps in German lines and exploited them without waiting for division approval. Within 18 hours, the 90th Infantry Division had advanced further than any other unit, achieved objectives not assigned to them, and created penetrations that higher headquarters didn't know existed until after they were accomplished. General Major Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer-Lehr Division facing the American breakthrough, transmitted increasingly desperate reports. American infantry has penetrated our lines at multiple points. We are attempting to contain breakthroughs, but American forces advance faster than we can reposition. Their soldiers show no tactical sophistication, but maintain aggressive forward movement that our counterattacks cannot stop. I have veterans of 4 years of combat. They fight well, but they face American replacements who arrive continuously. Young soldiers who attack recklessly. We kill them, more arrive. It is like fighting the tide. The Operation Cobra breakthrough succeeded not because of superior American planning or tactical excellence. It succeeded because thousands of American teenagers simply kept attacking until German defenses collapsed from exhaustion. The race across France, teenagers on the offensive. August 1944. With German defenses in Normandy collapsing, American armies began the pursuit across France. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized careful retreat, establishing successive defensive lines, trading space for time, preserving forces for later defense. American armies, led predominantly by soldiers under 25 years old, didn't give Germans time to implement doctrine. The 4th Armored Division, with average crew age under 23, covered 600 miles in 30 days. They advanced faster than German forces could retreat, captured German supply dumps, overran headquarters before staffs could evacuate. Oberst Ludwig Heilmann, attempting to organize defensive positions east of Paris, recorded the impossibility. Replacement rate, 40,000 soldiers per month, maintaining unit strength despite casualties. We identify terrain for defense. Before we can occupy it, Americans have already arrived. We attempt to establish blocking positions. Americans bypass them. We prepare ambush positions. Americans don't use the expected routes. They move with speed that makes coordinated defense impossible. Their soldiers are inexperienced. We capture boys who've been in uniform less than a year, but they maintain operational tempo that our veterans cannot match. By late August, American forces were liberating French cities faster than maps could be updated. The boys that Germans had mocked in June were covering distances in days that Wehrmacht planners assumed would require weeks. The numbers that disprove doctrine. By September 1944, Wehrmacht analysts compiled statistics that contradicted every pre-invasion assumption about American forces. Average age of American soldiers in combat divisions, 22 years. Median time in uniform before D-Day, 18 months. Percentage of soldiers with zero combat experience on June 6, 73%. Advance rate across France, 15 kilometers per day. Soviet forces averaged 8, British 6. German divisions destroyed or rendered combat ineffective, 28 by American forces in 90 days. American divisions suffering over 50% casualties who remained combat effective, 12. These numbers revealed an uncomfortable truth. American forces, despite youth and inexperience, were outperforming veteran Wehrmacht formations in nearly every measurable category. The Hurtgen Forest, where experience finally mattered. September to December 1944, the Hurtgen Forest. Here, finally, German predictions proved accurate in the dense woods along the German border, where visibility measured in meters and artillery couldn't effectively support infantry. American teenage soldiers encountered warfare that their aggression and initiative couldn't overcome. The battles in the Hurtgen Forest cost 33,000 American casualties over 4 months. Units that had advanced boldly across France found themselves trapped in brutal attrition warfare, where experience and careful tactics mattered more than youthful aggression. Veterans from both sides considered Hurtgen the moment when American forces learned that courage and initiative weren't always sufficient. But even here, the determination of American teenagers impressed their opponents. Oberstleutnant Gerhard Engel, defending in the Hurtgen, wrote, "The Americans continue attacking despite losses that would have stopped seasoned troops. They learn slowly. Too many soldiers die making mistakes veterans wouldn't make. But they learn eventually. And they never stop coming. Their replacements arrive from training camps, boys of 18 or 19, and within days they're attacking with the same aggression as the veterans they've replaced. In Russia, casualties eventually degraded unit effectiveness. American divisions simply absorb replacements and continue attacking. The final assessment: youth as strategy. willingness to accept casualties that our soldiers, having survived years of combat, seek to avoid, aggressive tactical doctrine that maintains operational tempo regardless of losses, logistics system that rapidly replaces casualties, maintaining unit strength. Most critically, absence of fear born from lack of combat experience, creating boldness that achieves objectives veterans would consider suicidal. The American reliance on young, inexperienced soldiers appears to be strategic choice rather than weakness. Their system rapidly trains soldiers to minimum competence, commits them to combat, and replaces casualties continuously. This produces forces less skilled individually, but more aggressive operationally than our veteran-based system. By war's end, captured German documents revealed a complete reversal of Wehrmacht assessment of American forces. A February 1945 training manual for German replacement units included this analysis. The American soldier, despite youth and limited training, demonstrates combat effectiveness that exceeds theoretical expectations. His advantages include initiative at junior levels exceeding that of our experienced NCOs. Voices of recognition. At Nuremberg, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, who had commanded Wehrmacht forces in France, was asked about the American Army's effectiveness. His response stunned listeners. The Americans did not defeat us through superior generalship or tactical brilliance. Their generals made numerous mistakes. Their tactics were often crude, but they defeated us through the audacity of their common soldiers. We sent veterans against them, men who had survived years of combat. They sent us boys fresh from training, and those boys attacked with a ferociousness that our experienced soldiers couldn't match. They didn't know enough to be afraid. They didn't understand that what they were attempting was impossible, so they did it anyway. General Oberst Alfred Jodl, chief of Wehrmacht operations, offered similar reflection. We assumed American youth and inexperience would be decisive weaknesses. Instead, they proved to be strategic advantages. Young soldiers recover from hardship faster. They adapt to new circumstances more readily. Most importantly, they attack without the hesitation that experience teaches. Our 40-year-old veterans understood when situations were hopeless. American 19-year-olds did not. So they won situations our veterans knew were hopeless. The human cost. The statistics carried a price measured in destroyed families and communities. The town of Bedford, Virginia, population 3,200, lost 23 soldiers on D-Day. Nearly all from Company A, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Infantry Division. Most were between 18 and 22 years old. Every small American town paid similar prices. High school classes from 1942 and 1943 were devastated. The teenagers who stormed Normandy died in percentages that today seem incomprehensible. But they achieved victory through that sacrifice. The audacity that killed so many also broke German defenses that military doctrine considered impregnable. The doctrine that emerged. Post-war, both American and European military establishments struggled to understand what had happened. How had inexperienced teenagers defeated veteran armies? The answer lay not in conventional military excellence, but in qualities military academies rarely emphasized. Adaptability over adherence to doctrine. Initiative over following orders precisely. Speed over careful preparation. Aggression over tactical sophistication. Replacement capacity over unit preservation. The American military system, criticized before D-Day for producing inadequately trained soldiers, had actually produced exactly the soldiers needed for the specific warfare of 1944 to 45. Young, aggressive, replaceable, and utterly fearless from lack of experience. The last word belongs to the young. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, surviving veterans returned to Normandy. Most were in their 70s, remembering when they'd been 18, 19, 20 years old. Robert Sales, who'd waded ashore under fire at 19, stood on Omaha Beach and was asked by a reporter, looking back now, understanding what you were facing, would you do it again? Sales thought for a long moment before responding, now? I'm old enough to understand what we were attempting was probably impossible. The defenses were too strong. We were too inexperienced. The casualties were too high. But at 19, I didn't know it was impossible. None of us did. We just knew we had a job to do, and we did it. Maybe that's why they sent teenagers. Old men would have been too smart to try. The Germans thought we were too young. They were right. We were too young to know we couldn't win, so we won anyway. The German generals who laughed at America's boy soldiers on June 6, 1944, stopped laughing by June 7th. By August, they were in full retreat. By May 1945, they were signing surrender documents. They had been defeated not by superior American generalship, better equipment, or tactical brilliance. They'd been defeated by teenagers who didn't know that what they were attempting was militarily impossible. The Wehrmacht had experience, training, tactical sophistication, and defensive positions that should have been impregnable. The Americans had 19-year-olds who simply refused to stop attacking. In the end, youth wasn't America's weakness, it was America's secret weapon. The German generals understood warfare. American teenagers didn't. And in the specific circumstances of 1944-45 France, not understanding warfare proved more valuable than understanding it. The German generals thought the U.S. Army was too young, until teenagers stormed Normandy, broke through the Atlantic Wall, raced across France, and won the war through sheer audacity that only the young and inexperienced could sustain. They were right about American youth, they were simply wrong about what that youth meant.